Welcome back to Whiskey Uncut. I'm your host, Paul, joined by James.
I mean, and how cliche are we now? We're just two dudes with beards talking about whiskey on a podcast.
Well, I will say it does give you a little more credibility now.
Oh, okay.
Your credibility was in question there as a whiskey reviewer
without the beard.
Temporarily without the beard.
Yeah.
So if you guys are watching on YouTube, this is Whiskey Uncut podcast. The full episode will be available in audio format everywhere, and the full video to patrons. So support us on patreon.com/maltmondays. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about Weller. So we kind of thought about doing this as a blind tasting of the lineup of Weller, but the problem is there's such a great disparity of the proof difference.
And the age. I mean, Weller 12 is much oakier than some of the others. So
yeah,
and I think it would be a little bit obvious, and I do think there's probably a better order to try them in.
Right. So this is actually fun for me because the only one of these I'm familiar with at all is Weller Special Reserve. I've tried all of them at one point, but it was like 5 or 6 years ago. And I tried them once.
That was about the last time that you could find any.
Yeah.
Since then, it's been kind of difficult. But, what's kind of interesting about this is we're sort of on an even playing field because these all are Buffalo Trace Wheated Mash Bill. Nobody knows exactly what the Wheated Mash Bill is, but it's rumored to be somewhere around 70% corn and then 14 to 16% wheat, 14 to 16% malted barley.
Yeah.
So it's pretty close to the original like Stitzel Weller Pappy recipe, which is why all of this went bonkers, right? Because once Pappy was not available anymore, and when you and I started into whiskey, I don't know if you remember, but you could go and buy Pappy on a shelf. But I remember going into a couple stores and finding like an old Rip 10 year or, finding, I think once I did find a Pappy 15. Like you could find them. Once that went away and you couldn't do it anymore, people sort of turned to these.
I was like a year or two late to the game, and I've never seen any of it on the shelf ever. So
that's where all the similarities end, though, is really at the mash bill. Everything here, we'll go through this, but other than the Weller 12, everything is younger than what you're going to see in the Pappy line. Most things are 6 to 8 in this lineup. So that's the mash bill is sort of where the similarities end.
Listen to this amazing cork pop.
Oh, yeah, that's nice. That's nice.
So satisfying.
The twist top is it's so wonderful to hear. Just aluminum on glass.
Now, do you know if there's a reason why Weller does the twist tops?
I do not. And it didn't used to, but now they do it for that and the Weller 12. So again, this is the Wheated Mash Bill. If you look online, everybody says that other than the Weller 12, all of these are sort of a blend of 6 years to 8 years, but I have seen some references towards this maybe being a little bit younger, maybe having some 4-year in it. It's 90 proof, and if you can find it at retail, you're looking at $20 to $30 range, most of the time in the 25. But there are crazy people online paying well into the $100 to $200 range for this bottle.
All right. So Special Reserve, and this is, as far as allocated bourbons go, this is basically the only one I've ever found. And again, it wasn't on a shelf. I had to ask the guy at ABC, and they had one left. So I've gotten it twice the same way. But it's still sold out this day it was delivered, the case of it, sold out same day, and you had to ask, and they pull it out from under the counter, and it's one per customer. So
now I will fully admit going into this, just to get it out there, this has always been by far my least favorite of the group. And so it's always been a little bit perplexing to me that people chase this bottle because I really feel like it is
but it says
a
Weller
$20 to $25 bottle. And that's really all it is. And it doesn't, we'll see how it goes through this. But to me, it never stood up to the rest of these. And I was never a huge fan of the rest of them.
So here's the thing to me about this one. On the aroma, I think this smells distinctly different than most $20 whiskeys because of that Wheated Mash Bill. And I think that's why people go after it.
I mean, it smells light and sweet. There's a fruitiness to it. It's very cherry heavy to me. And quite a bit of vanilla. But it's not bad to me. It's very muted. You can tell that it's a 90 proof whiskey. It's not a complex nose. It's kind of fruity, a little bit dusty.
Yeah, but I like the kind of cherry aroma to it, like the maraschino kind of cherry smell it's got going on.
It sort of reminds me of a generic Wheater.
Yeah.
Like maybe I think it has maybe a slightly better nose than Larceny, but I don't know that it's sort of in that ballpark.
So that was going to be my question, though. Is how many other $20 wheated bourbons are that are available? There's not that many, right?
No, not many at all.
I mean, there's more now than there were, but there's still only a handful. So I do, from that perspective, and from the fact that it carries the Weller name, which automatically gives it, street cred, as the kids say.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, I don't think kids say that
I don't think so anymore,
all.
no. It's just old dudes with beards that say street cred anymore.
Yeah. I would say this is pretty lit, James.
Oh, my God. All right. This is getting off to a bad start. I did see some people there was a whole article about which one of these was closer to Pappy. And somebody picked this and I cried because to me, it's not anywhere in the ballpark. It's very thin on the palate. It's really light. It's kind of one-dimensional.
Well,
and
okay.
It just doesn't go anywhere for you.
But here's the thing. It's 45% ABV. So I feel like you always attack these younger whiskeys. You're like, oh, it's thin on the palate. But like, you got to consider, like, is it thin on the palate relative to other 45%?
Well, no, that's
ABV whiskeys?
That's what I'm saying.
Would you just say everything is
thin? No. I think this is thin on the palate because the flavor profile is really light. Some of the Pt.1 and 23 are in the 95 proof range. I can't remember exactly where they're at, but they're under 100, so they're not that much different than this. But they are older, and that age also adds a little bit of flavor to it. So here you have a young whiskey that's proof down, and to me, that's a recipe to have a thin palate.
So here's what I'll say about this bottle. When I first got it and opened it, that first pour, I was like, this is great. I really like this. Like, I totally understand why people go out and go after it. And every subsequent glass I've had of it, I have enjoyed less.
Very different opinions. Well, and how much of that is hype too? Like you said yourself, this is really one of the only allocated ones you found. This is the only one you've tried of this lineup. So how much of that was just anticipation and thinking that it was going to be better than what it actually probably is?
And then after that first tasting, once the veil had been lifted and it was no longer this, pie in the sky with like, oh, I'm so excited I got a bottle of Weller, then I was like, oh yeah, it's just like,
it's just okay.
It's not bad. It's just fine.
It's just boring to me. There's not a whole lot going on. It's very like vanilla cherry kind of one note. It doesn't really go anywhere on the palate. It's fine. If you gave this to me and I did it blind, I'd be like, yeah, it's okay. It's probably a mixer for me.
Yeah,
the fact that people are paying $200 for something
that's ridiculous.
that I would use as a mixer is, again, part of that could be being a snob, but I think part of it is also it's clearly not worth that much money.
There's also no finish to this.
Oh, zero.
Like at all. Like, I mean, it's gone. So I think that cherry flavor, if that's not what you're expecting, could be a little weird. Because this is not like your standard bourbon flavors, but it shouldn't be because it's made out of wheat.
So I was going back and forth about which one to do next, but I think we're going to go in order of proof here. So let's go to Weller 12.
All right.
So this is also 90 proof, obviously 12 years old.
Get that cork pop.
Oh yeah, some more of the screw top. Same mash bill, obviously. Here you're in about the $40 to $50 range. So this used to be a lot less than that. Back in the day, I think you could get this for $25, maybe $30.
Yeah.
Now MSRP is 40. Again, no chance that you're going to get it at 40. No. I was doing a little bit of digging around and I actually saw it go for $400.
That's what I was going to say. I feel like the average retail to secondary markup for bourbon, when we talked about this on our episode about bourbon prices and whiskey prices in general, the average markup is about 10 times for allocated bourbons. So up to higher if we're talking something like Pappy 23. Now, without trying it, I would say 12 years old at $40 sounds like a great deal.
Yeah, and you can still find this some places. I was just in Wisconsin for Thanksgiving, and I found it at a bar, and I got a pour of it for $15.
This smells much better.
It does. It's richer. There's more oak on the nose. It's even, like, to me, it even leans heavier into the fruit.
I think it almost smells brighter to me than the Special Reserve just is so one note on that kind of cherry character, that to me,
Yeah, I mean, it's much richer. There's no comparison on the nose.
yeah, this one actually smells really good.
It's still kind of muted though, right? You have to get your nose way in the glass to get it.
Well, yeah, but it's
not-
only 45%.
Yeah.
So,
But
I
still,
mean, it's
12 years though. Like I would expect it to be maybe a little bit more aromatic than what it is. But when you do get it, I agree. It smells good.
12 years is like that kind of tipping point between like a well-aged bourbon and too old of a bourbon.
Yeah.
So you do get a little bit of that sawdust. Like the oak is noticeable on the aroma of this, I would say.
So when I first started collecting, you could find Weller 12 at ABC pretty much anytime you wanted. And I remember having a conversation with...
I do remember seeing Weller on the shelf.
Yeah. I remember having a conversation with a group of folks at Dorn's when you were working there. And the debate was, why would you chase all this other stuff when you can just have Weller 12?
Mm-hmm.
Because you would drink it and be like, hey, yeah, that's fine, right? Tastes good. It's got a little bit something going on. It's weeded. It's different. And I don't have to search for it. So it's kind of ironic that now you can't find it anywhere. But this used to be one of those bottles you were like, well, I'm just going to keep it on my shelf and I'll go to it back and forth. I'll go to it whenever I want. And it's probably a better option than some of these ones I'm having to chase. And now it's the one being chased.
I feel like I understand going after this bottle at $40. This one I understand. I don't understand paying any more than like
$40,
$50 for like.
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't think it's much better than $40.
But I do think this is, and again, we talk about the difference between whiskeys that are great for enthusiasts and whiskeys that are great for the 99% of other people that are buying whiskeys, right? And this is one of those whiskeys that I can imagine giving to my brother and his friends and taking to a party and people just like slamming in old fashions and on the rocks and just being like, oh, it's so smooth. Like that would be everyone's favorite part about it is how smooth it is.
So
right?
smooth. It's soft.
Because it is. I mean, 12 years old at 45% for a bourbon is very well matured, but still at a low enough, very approachable proof. And this is like one of the softest bourbons I've had.
I think it's a really good example. Like people ask all the time about what's the characteristic of a wheated bourbon. And I always say the mouthfeel is much softer with a wheated bourbon.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
The spice note from the rye helps kind of with the alcohol kick. So those two play in and you get a more punchy flavor. When you take the rye out and you put the wheat in, I think you get a much softer mouthfeel. Even the proof feels lower when you have a wheated mash bill. And I think this is probably the best example from the lineup of that.
Yeah.
It's very soft. The 12 years, there's enough tannin in there. It still coats your mouth. It doesn't have a super long finish. Mm-hmm. And I think I still get there's a little bit of caramel. There's a ton of vanilla. And then much more oak than what I remember getting, back in the day when I had this on my shelf.
Yeah. No, I mean, I legitimately think that if you gave this that the majority of people that are like, oh, I like bourbon, would taste this and be like, wow, that's amazing. Like as far as crowd pleasing whiskeys. And I think that is the reason why Buffalo Trace's range is so sought after, is they've done two things incredibly well. They've made whiskeys like this, and then they've made 85,000 proof George T. Stagg whiskeys they're the only brand that has managed to perfectly hit both audiences of the whiskey community.
And what's funny about this too is like I watched the progression, right? So when I was getting into whiskey, though, and by the way, people always say Pappy for anything that's Van Winkle, and that's not the case.
I know.
But the true Pappy stuff, the 23, the 20, and the 15, you could still find those when I started, but they were rare.
Yeah.
And then once those became completely unattainable, nobody could find them, people started to move down. And so then Lot B and Old Rip 10 started to gain some momentum. And then those became too hard to find. And then I remember when this happened, there was a thread in one of these OG Facebook groups that was like, hey, Weller 12 is actually just
as
barrels that didn't quite make the cut for Lot B. And Lot B,
I don't think that's accurate.
I don't think so either.
This
And Lot B were barrels that were just not quite good enough for Pappy 15.
right.
So people connected the dots, and somehow Weller 12 became
Yeah.
almost as good as Pappy 15. But that's how it happened. And
you know what that
you
sounds
forgot
like?
the sense that you forgot the fact that it didn't make it to Lot B.
Yeah.
Right? It's just that connection with 15.
You know what that sounds like is a bunch of guys in a boardroom sitting down and they're like, all right, look, what we made like the best bourbon on the market. Because I mean, I would legitimately say Pappy and the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection are essentially like, if you just had to pick, they are the most consistently incredible bourbons on the market.
Yeah. I mean, if you were going to ask me right now, one pour that I want right at this moment, I would take Stag.
Yeah. And I would probably say Handy.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even like rye.
You don't
Is
even like
not
rye.
Rye
Yeah.
is not my favorite, but the Handy is just phenomenal. Or Stag. I mean, Stag is never a disappointment. So, and it's like, I just feel like there's a boardroom of guys at Buffalo Trace that were like, all right, we've sold out all this and we have all this other stuff that's still sitting on shelves for like a couple weeks. Like, how dare it?
Oh my God. It's
Like,
14 days it's been sitting there. What are we going to do?
how can we make sure that everything is sold before it leaves the factory? and they're like, all right, here's what we're going to do. We'll bring some of our sales reps, our distributors in for a warehouse tour. Cause they do this, every year or two, they'll invite like their, they'll invite like the regional reps to come to the warehouse and do stuff. And then it trickles down. So like every few years, if you're a rep, you usually get invited to go visit the facilities to help boost your knowledge of the product. And you just know that whoever was giving them that warehouse tour is like, don't tell anybody. But these barrels are the same as those barrels. They just barely didn't make the cut.
We just so close. So close.
We just ran out of barreling capacity for Lot B.
Oh, see, that's even a better argument. It's not that they didn't make it. We just didn't have room to put it in.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It was just our batch is only 100 barrels at a time.
What else are we going to do?
And these were the 101st barrels. So don't tell
anybody.
and like, yeah, I'm sure that's how it happened.
I'm sure that's what happened. Yeah. But that's where all this kind of madness started.